welcome to today's Functional Drinks webinar. A very good morning, afternoon, and evening to our audience who are watching on LinkedIn from the comforts of their homes, offices, maybe third spaces, all around the world. I hope that everyone is sitting comfortably and has a functional drink in hand, like this one here. We're not sponsored by Red Bull. I've just brought an example of my favorite drink, and it is unopened. I wouldn't be so reckless as to pound one of these at 8 p.m. JST, so close to bedtime. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about the very exciting market for functional beverages, which is booming, and it's expected to reach a value of almost 300 billion United States dollars by 2030. So there is a lot to talk about today. Now, before we kick things off, I'd just like to explain a little bit about the outline of today's event. So, after the introductions, we'll dive straight into discussion with our panel of experts in functional drinks. And at the end, we'll have about 10 minutes of question time from the audience. So if any of the discussion during the panel discussion part inspires you, please prepare some questions to share with us during Q&A time. Now, before we kind of go any further, I would also like to add that we actually have a very special announcement for the end of the webinar today. It's an exciting opportunity for all of you in the food and beverage industry. So if that intrigues you, I urge you to hang around until the end of the webinar because you really won't want to miss this. Okay, before I kick things off again, I should just introduce the organizers of today's event, which is Gourmet Pro. So what is Gourmet Pro? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it couldn't be any simpler than what you see on screen. Gourmet Pro provides the food and beverage industry with talent matching services in a fraction of the time that it would take to hire somebody. How do we do this? We've cultivated a pre-vetted network of food and beverage industry experts who are highly skilled and also globally based. So we can support your needs wherever you are in the world with the right talent. And that's across the entire value chain. Now, to give you a slight peek under the curtain, actually, our network of food and beverage industry experts is vast, and every week we try to hold an event like you're watching today, where we gather together our experts and discuss various interesting trends and innovations in the industry. This is the first time that we're actually broadcasting one of these live. So if you're watching, you're very lucky, and I hope that you take away as much as we normally do from these exciting events. And just to double down on what I said at the beginning, that's not all. For any of you who are kind enough to join us on LinkedIn today and watch this event, at the end of today's session, we have an exciting announcement for our food and beverage industry viewers, so stay tuned. Okay, with that said, I think we can move on to introduction. So who is the guy yakking at you right now? My name is Toby Manley. I'm a content strategist and the moderator for today's event. I write APAC's #1 food and beverage industry innovation newsletter, which is called Market Shake. Beginning next week, we're actually going to launch a brand new series about the topic that we're discussing in today's webinar, which is functional drinks. It's going to be packed full of exclusive insights about the market, consumers, and commentary from experts. So please scan the QR code you see on screen and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of that. In addition to that, I also work as the content manager at Gourmet Pro, who are organizing today's event, as I mentioned earlier. So I do all kinds of, in addition to the newsletter, I do all kinds of other content magic. But enough about me. Let's move on to introducing the stars of tonight's event, our panel of wonderful industry experts. So I'm going to go through the panel and just ask each of you guys to introduce yourself. Please tell the audience a little bit about, or tell me a little bit about yourself, what you do, and then also to keep things topical, please could you share your favorite functional beverage as well? So I'll start with, let's just go from left to right. Jan, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, good morning, afternoon, or evening to everybody. This is Jan Vidal. I've been passionate and working in the food and beverage industry for the last 20 years, especially in commercial areas, marketing, innovation, trade marketing, business development. Well, I started in the beginning with mainstream categories, but since very early stage in my career, I decided to shift to, let's say, the new generation of food and beverage, always in categories related to weight management, health, sustainability. So yeah, it's part of my passion, my background, and my current job, fortunately. And regarding my favorite beverage, let's say I have many. There is one for every moment, I guess. I would say that one that is tasty is good for me and is good for the planet, let's say. And I tend to use nowadays kombucha. Why? Because it's natural, refreshing, tasty, and gives me energy as well. Makes me better, and is also normally comes in a sustainable packaging, which I think it's the perfect mix. And I would say that it's a bit expensive, so I pick my moments. But I also enjoy having a good espresso in the morning, which I believe is also a great functional and natural drink indeed, or sometimes alcohol-free beer. So, which I believe is also functional. So it's the definition of a functional drink in my personal opinion is broad, and this is what it makes the topic of today exciting.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Okay, so our next panelist is Raphael. Please, could you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Toby. It's a pleasure to be here today, and lovely to hear from our audience as well about functional drinks. So thank you, Jan, for the introduction. I suppose, well, you're focusing probably on the route to market. My role is primarily around product to market. So my experience is very much around ingredients, formulation, product design, all the way to scale up and commercialization. So we usually work hand in hand with you, making sure that the product that we develop are aligned with the expectation and the requirements from the consumer. I've been in the industry about 25 years. I'm based here in Ireland, and I work on global projects trying to identify and pick up on some of those early signals, but at the same time making sure that the products and the experience are more aligned with the local expectations, because we can see some differences among the different markets. So again, very eager and interested to hear about what those can look like from a product development, but also commercialization perspective. In terms of favorite functional drink, mine is actually very customized and personalized, and it's pretty much a trade secret. I have it in my house. I have developed that for the last couple of years, and it's extremely functional in viscosity and texture and in nutritional profile. I can address number of different requirements that fit me, 50-year-old woman who needs sustained energy throughout the day. So looking for investors if anybody is interested, but it's quite unique, and I think it's an excellent product. Nobody else around me in the family seems to be very interested, but I know it works for me.
Thank you very much, Raphael. I am extremely intrigued in that product. Okay, Sayantan, please could you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Toby. As Raphael said, it's a pleasure to be here with the esteemed panelists, Raphael and Jan. And Raphael, I would probably like to try out that trade secret red beverage that you have in your fridge someday. So myself, my name is Sayantan Paul, and I hail from India, and I've been in the food industry for the last 8 years. I've My career started as being a dairy technologist, and then from there I moved across different categories of the food industry, like tea, ready-to-drink beverages, ready-to-eat snacks, and all. And I worked across various functions like food safety, regulatory, quality, product development, consumer research. I think presently I am with a multinational organization in the capacity of a domain consultant. And I look forward to this engaging session with all of you over here. My favorite functional beverage, of course. There's a story in itself. So it's a simple one. It's a drinking yogurt. But the history goes back that I am lactose intolerant. The irony is that I've told that I started my career as a dairy technologist, and I'm lactose intolerant. Most people in this part of the world are, by the way. But I look at the drinking yogurts as a way to quench my thirst and refresh myself, and also satiate myself. So it's like so when you're hungry and nothing much to look forward to, you can have a drinking yogurt infused with fruits and other functional stuff. Of course, I found out that I can't have dairy like milk, right? The only way to incorporate dairy benefits into my system is to fermented products, and drinking yogurt is something that I really love.
Thank you, Sayantan. I am also on board with you there with the drinking yogurt. It's quite an enormous category here in Japan. Okay, so first of all, thank you very much to our panelists for the very interesting introductions. There's, I think the fascinating thing about today's speakers is they cover various different aspects of the kind of functional drinks value chain. So I'm looking forward to the discussion, which we're going to jump into right now. So the first question I have is a bit of a broad one just to get things started, but the kind of functional drinks market has been growing globally across the last few years, and it had a kind of interesting boost during the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, I think. So I would just like to ask our speakers, what are some of the kind of main categories and innovations that they're seeing in their local markets in terms of functional drinks? Just kind of introduce this topic. And if I could start by throwing this question to Raphael.
Yeah, thanks, Toby. Certainly what I have seen happening in this category is a lot of products, mainly from startups around digestion and gut health, anything to do with cleansing and detoxification, a lot around relaxation and stress relief, quite a lot happening as well around energy and electrolytes. Certainly mind, body are also very much part of the cocktail of different type of product that are coming out, and anything to do with supplement drink. I think sometimes it can be easy to forget how with functional drink we can explore different segments, whether it is the mass market. I think there is an awful lot to be done around just looking at the nutritional profile and trying to improve that nutritional profile to make it more functional. But that goes all the way to dietary supplements and also potentially enteral nutrition, or even infant nutrition, where for young babies, the functional drinks is actually the sole source of nutrition. And it even goes also into the medical sector. So, there is a very wide spectrum here of consumers who would be very interested and potentially dependent on functional drinks. So we can look at that. Some categories are obviously more established and probably cover a wider spectrum of the population. But again, I think it's very important to differentiate, what functional drinks are and, what are the different kind of audiences that are interested in functional drinks. So I think it was mentioned earlier, but I mean, it covers a wide spectrum of functionality, nutritional profile, and health benefit and experiences. So I think, you know, there is plenty there to discuss. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really interesting point, and one I think we should come back to. It's the kind of different segments of functional drinks and in the different kind of consumer profiles, and indeed what functional drinks kind of means to them. But I'll kind of pass this question on as well to John and Sayantan. What kind of trends are you seeing in the functional drink space in your relative regions? I'll just leave this one open for either of you to jump in.
Well,
So,
yes.
Yeah, you can go.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I will try to be brief on this. Well, in Spanish market, what mainly is driving innovation lately, and still the main drivers for new product development is pleasure and convenience, which in the end is also a function of the beverage in the beverage space. Altogether, they account for 40% more or less of the launches of the brands in Spain. But what we are seeing is a shift to healthification. Let's say to take some relevant categories which are not perceived as maybe healthy or sustainable, and healthificate them. Well, reducing the contents of sugar, the contents of alcohol. This more or less is 15 to 20% of the launches. And finally, I would say naturalness and added functionality in terms of, you know, personalization. It's another 20%. So this is what we are seeing lately, but the shift is towards the later, towards naturalness with new botanics included and functionality. Better for you, let's say, proposals.
Fascinating. Yeah, I think the idea of personalization is something that we can probably delve into later, because it's a very interesting aspect of the functional beverage. So anyway, Sayantan.
In India,
Yeah.
you know, it's following the same trend as the global lines mostly. In terms of the launches in the market, you see a lot of launches in lines of health and wellness. People are looking at beverages to, you know, ramp up their immunity, ramp up their health and wellness needs and all. Wellness, of course, has taken precedence over health in the recent years after the pandemic and the rising awareness on mental health needs. So you will see a lot of beverages having claims of relaxation, and a lot of adaptogens being included, and a lot of nootropic beverages that are there in the market. Then you have a lot of stuff that Jan mentioned, natural, no sugar, all those claims are there. And you have plant-based, like in the majority part of the world, this movement is driving the trend of functional foods. But in India, because it is the largest producer of milk, right? The number of functional beverage launches in the dairy sector far outnumber the number of launches in the plant-based space. And there is a lot of innovation going on in the dairy sector in terms of plant-based beverages. No, sorry, not plant-based beverages, in terms of functional beverages.
Interesting. I was reading recently-ish that I think Amul maybe launched like a protein lassi in India to kind of...
High protein is one of these things of personalization, right? People who go to gyms and people who are more focused on healthy living, they will look at high protein sources, and beverage is one of these sources to get them to get high protein things in their diet.
Brilliant. Okay, so I think a kind of pertinent next question. Maybe just actually, I'd like to ask our panelists, like, as an industry, we are very kind of in touch with trends and, like, I don't know, the terminology around them. But do you think that consumers are kind of aware of like the term functional beverage? Like what do you think it means to consumers? And I'll start off by passing this to Raphael.
From a consumer's standpoint, I think functional beverages is too broad, in the sense that the customized experience is really what makes functional beverages relevant to the target audience. And we have heard that, you know, for some people, it's a specific nutritional profile, like high in protein. For other people, it's around pleasure and convenience. For other people, it's a health benefit. So in terms of hitting the sweet spot, so to speak, I think it's very important for the product or the brand to be a little bit more specific than functional beverages, so that it really resonates with the target consumer and the target audience. So I have no doubt that, you know, those insights from a consumer perspective are critical to align the functional beverages with the expectation. And I would suggest that, you know, brands or companies or entrepreneurs go quite deep, actually, in this alignment. So that goes all the way from ingredient selection to formulation to packaging to product format to shelf life, and all the communication and the branding that goes around the functional beverage to make it just smooth and easy from the consumer perspective, because we know people, you know, don't like friction, and they expect quite a lot from the brand and from the product. So all of those aspects would have to be, you know, carefully taken into account during the innovation project, or even sometimes renovation. You know, sometimes it's a big innovation, but in terms of life cycle management around innovation, we can also look at continuous improvement opportunities. So those are the different aspects that I think are critical to be a lot more specific, to ensure that that functional beverage is customized to the needs and to the requirement of the target audience. So that would be my recommendation, but maybe our other speakers, you know, have a different perspective, but that would be my suggestion, to go a lot more specific and customize or personalize as opposed to just functional beverages.
Thank you, Raphael. Yeah, absolutely. I think we should hear from our other speakers on this one, but I think definitely that it's the different kinds of functions that are gonna, you know, spark a reaction from consumers rather than just kind of a general category. So let's see what the rest of the panel thinks. Jan, do you have any input on this one? Like, how much does this term kind of functional beverage mean to consumers?
Yeah, well, building on top of what Raphael mentioned, which there is a specific point that she said about, you know, softening the rationality, you know, the rationality. Sometimes functional drinks, we tend to express their very rationally, you know, like 100% less, or with figures and so forth. So the magic in the end is how to market them and how to soften that communication and to make it more emotional, because in the end we are emotional animals, and we need to perceive the added value, not only rationally but also with what's this drink offering to me, which is different, but from an emotional standpoint as well, no?
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating, actually, because like you mentioned, a lot of the marketing around these kind of products does focus very much on kind of, you know, there's 100% extra of this kind of ingredient and that kind of things. But I think when it comes to a consumer, at least when it comes to myself, when I choose to consume a functional beverage, it's because, for example, I want some energy, or I want to, you know, I want to stay awake, or I want to kind of relax or something like that. It's a lot more kind of, I don't know if primal is the right word, but there's a certain amount of emotion involved. So that's really interesting and important, I think. And I'll just finally, Sayantan, do you have any input on this? What does functional beverages really mean to consumers?
Yeah, I kind of resonate with what Rafael and Jan said. I only just want to say that from a formulation point of view of functional beverages, the question was, do consumers really care about the term functional? In India, at least, functional term doesn't mean much to the customers. So from a formulated point of view, you have to get the basics right. That is the taste. You can incorporate a number of botanicals into the functional beverage, make it functional, but at the end of the day, if it does not taste right, if it doesn't have the right texture, it all goes to vain. You put thousands of dollars into marketing, it doesn't really come out that well. Apart from that, what consumers are wanting nowadays in beverages, apart from the taste, you also have to provide them that experience, the entire experience from opening the pack to the sip, and then about the functional benefit that you mentioned on the pack, like it's relaxation, whether they are really able to feel it or not, you have to get it tested. You have to really get your basics right in terms of formulation, testing, and quality, and then come out with the beverage in the market. The other point of view is how sustainability is. The new age customers, especially Gen Z, will look at how sustainable is the beverage, and that is one point they would look at rather than the functional term. What matters to them is what health benefit they're claiming about. If that resonates with their needs or personalized needs, I will call it, because we will be delving into the question of personalization, and then the sensorials of the product and the sustainability nowadays.
If I may add something, I would say, I mean, in the end, the process, I'm not saying anything new here, but the process, in my opinion, should start from the consumer shoes. So picking a certain pain point, picking a certain consumer target, and building backwards to the technologies, which will allow to solve that kind of problem. So this is the process I believe is normally successful in any category, not only in functional drinks.
Great, thank you very much, guys. I would like to, I think, piggyback a little bit off what was just said there, and the kind of basic question that I have is, so how should these products ideally be marketed? Like, should we be, on the front of the latest functional Pepsi beverage? Should we be plastering the benefit, or kind of would you say is kind of the best practice and the best approach to marketing these products? Thinking of, front of label promotion, but then also more broadly in terms of, the rest of what marketing incorporates. What would you advise here? And Jan, if I can kind of ask you this.
Yeah, normally, I mean, we have the temptation of putting as many benefits as possible in the front pack. No, I agree that I mean, you can use you need to use the packaging to try to express as many benefits as possible of the product, but you can also use the back panel. You need to be very selective of what the benefits of your product are, and less is more, as usual. So try to bring the most relevant messages to the front pack is a general recommendation I would use, and try to make it not too much, how to say, explicit. So because it's also a temptation to make it as explicit, as much explicit as possible. Try to make it as much emotional, because in the end, as we said, it's we are emotional animals. And in the front pack, I would use as few messages as possible and as much emotional as possible. As an example, you just shown the Red Bull can, no? You have the Red Bull, which is also already expressing, not in a very explicit way, that it's energy, no? All the communication related to Red Bull brand is not too much explicit, but all the investments they do it because, I mean, they have an energy drink, no?
Fascinating, yeah. And I kind of wonder as well, like with the example of Red Bull, how these messages kind of translate across different markets as well. But kind of before we go any further into that, Sayantan, what do you think about this? Like, what would you say is kind of best practice for marketing functional beverages?
As Jan said, not trying to be too explicit. Trying to be explicit will, of course, if you try to be too explicit, you will be caught under the regulatory lens, which is something you don't want to get into. And then you might end up not resonating with the customer needs at all. They will understand very simplistic terms, and they want something which is generic and which is fulfilling their needs. So explicit terms won't work, and less is more, as they said. Sometimes I see in the Indian market beverages with n number of benefits on the front of the pack within one beverage. Now, which is the most relevant one to this is very difficult to understand. And there comes a decision whether you buy or not, or maybe one-time buy.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally can relate to that. I've seen beverages before with all kinds of different, amino acids and that kind of thing. And it alone, that doesn't mean a whole lot. But, if you say this amino acid is going to help me focus, all right, I'm in. I need to focus.
Rather than that, I would prefer some of the companies I know. This brand Auric in India, which has launched a line of beverages with different health benefits, with different beverages. They have launched 4 or 5 beverages, each claiming to have different health benefits. One of them claims to have weight loss benefit. One of them claims to have benefit for people suffering from hair loss, for skin rejuvenation, for rejuvenation and relaxation. And they all use specific ingredients catering to that benefit, like Garcinia cambogia for weight loss, aloe vera for hair loss. So I prefer that strategy rather than marketing everything in one beverage. It doesn't really sound trustworthy.
Okay, actually, I mean, I'm just conscious of time, and there are a couple of questions that I want to ask about a topic that you just mentioned, Sayantan, which is kind of around regulations. So functional beverages incorporate a lot of different ingredients that pose challenges from a regulatory standpoint. I think a lot of the ingredients, depending on the function, are kind of novel in many regions. So I'm just like, and I imagine we'll have slightly different answers here based on the region, but kind of what would the panel recommend are the best practices for companies developing functional drinks to avoid these regulatory issues? Because I do know a lot of companies have been kind of caught out here when they've developed functional beverages. So what, Sayantan, actually, I'll just throw this to you to start with.
See, as you mentioned very clearly, that a lot of companies have been caught out, and it's very normal to get out when developing a proprietary product or a functional beverage. Now, the best practices for them, there are 2 basic practices that every company should follow. One is obviously attention to detail to every regulatory norm that you are of the market or the production area that you are going to market or produce the product in, right? That is non-negotiable. You cannot miss anything, and then you cannot afford to get caught up by missing anything. And then having an experienced regulatory team at your end will help you navigate the nuances of the regulatory norms and legislations. Having said that, there are certain things the formulators should know about. You cannot just incorporate any ingredient in the diet and call out any benefit for them, right? The US FDA has very strict rules for health benefits. So it's better to call out, even in India, health benefits, you cannot just call out like that. Obviously, certain startups and certain aggressive marketeers do that, but they end up with the risk of being caught very easily. And there have been instances like that. So what they recommend is that the claims must be structural and functional led rather than the health benefit claim, which is very explicit. Structural claims, functional claims like calcium enhances bone strength.
Mm-hmm.
That is a functional claim that by itself, and all dairy beverages can make that, right? Then the other best practice, what many companies fail to see at the moment is if you see, when you incorporate a particular ingredient conferring a particular functional benefit to your health or something, that ingredient must stay below a certain threshold level throughout the life cycle of the product or the shelf life of the product. Now, in order to launch the products in the market quickly, companies resort to accelerated shelf life testing. Sometimes they miss the threshold, testing the threshold level of that specific ingredient for the entire life cycle of the product. And that might land them in trouble, right? Because I can buy the beverage after 2 months of its manufacture, but I will expect the same health benefit. Now, if somebody tests in the market and finds out the vitamin level below the threshold, then that's a problem. For that, you need to consider all the factors that come into the formulation ecosystem, even packaging, even the other ingredients, how they interact with them. It is very essential to delve into the basics and then make a claim, make a risk assessment matrix for the regulatory bottlenecks that you can be caught up in. So these are some of the best practices that you can use. And obviously, there are practices like looking at the GRAS list, or in case of India, the schedules, the IFCT regulations and all. You can look at that, and if it's not there, then you have to apply for foods for non-specific use. So some of those are basics.
Okay, great. That was really detailed. Thanks, Sayantan. Rafael, do you have anything to add on this point?
So maybe just to reinforce what I call compliance by design. And I think, a good understanding of the regulatory framework set the scene for those innovation opportunities for functional beverages. So completely agree with what was said earlier. Certainly, going back to some of the basics in terms of, nutritional profile, I think it's very important to look at the carbohydrate, to look at the sugar, the fibers, also potentially protein content. So, back to basics and making sure that all of those are aligned with the regulation, that they have been tested, that the product deliver on some of those very basic nutritional profile, and then maybe stretch that to some of those very unique functional or bioactive ingredients that can either support specific health benefit or maybe enhance the consumer experience of the functional beverage. So all of those would have to be taken into consideration. And back to the health claim that we touched on earlier, I think it's very important to have some solid science and evidence around the performance and the efficacy of some of those ingredients, because we also spoke about how the consumer expects to feel the difference, right? So whether it is Red Bull or a cup of coffee, there is an expectation there that if the product is claimed to support a specific health benefit, it has to deliver. To build that trust and to make sure that there is some loyalty and long-term purchase of the product. So those have to be taken into consideration, along with obviously, doing the due diligence in terms of shelf life and stability of the product. And some of those markets may have some very severe climate conditions. So it's important to take that into account, to test the product, to stress the product, and also in terms of distribution and storage, those elements would have to be taken into account to make sure that the product delivers, again, as we mentioned earlier, raw material, product design, formulation, processing, scale up, all the way to the consumption. And not to forget the packaging. I think it's something that can often be underestimated or overlooked, but packaging is the first interaction with the product, and it is the last interaction with the product. So there is an awful lot of touch point with the consumer around the packaging. So we have the product, we have the packaging, we have the supply chain, the value chain, and those have to be taken into account. But again, just to reiterate how the regulatory framework is critical and has to be at the core of all the product development or commercialization projects for functional beverages.
Yeah,
Wow.
I will also I will only add two things here, as it's not my field of expertise. I would make two recommendations. First one, hire a senior advisor like my peers in this panel. Secondly, I would say make a matrix of risk and opportunities, because in the end there is no zero risk when it comes to regulatory. It's important to understand what is the upside of every risk you pick. And for this, you will need a senior advisor that is not only aware of which is the regulations, the legislation behind, but also has enough experience to understand, the authorities, which kind of things they look at to more intensively, and also are aware of, the upside and the business behind.
Wow.
I'd like to add one more important point. It's important that we test the product in every condition we will market the product in. Suppose we have seen the mistake with many companies, especially with smaller companies. They are producing the product probably in, say, an European market, and then if they are putting it in the Indian market, they have tested it in the European market, not in Indian condition, which is way different. And the product can behave way differently. The ingredients can behave way differently. And at the end, the functional benefits that we've conferred will not be the same as the European market. And so it's very important to test your shelf life, or to do a proper storage study or shelf life study in the conditions that you want to market in all the conditions.
Absolutely. I think there was, for our audience watching at home or in the office or wherever you are, there was a tremendous amount of wisdom in that discussion, which it was so interesting to listen to. But I would kind of, like, we touched on some of the different ingredients there and some of the challenges around those ingredients. I would just like to dive into one category, actually, that you guys have talked about a moment ago, and that I know is really growing across markets around the world. And that is the kind of market for these, pre and post-biotic functional drink products, right? So, there's a I feel over the past couple of years, the awareness around the kind of synergy, the axis between the brain and the gut, and the importance of having a healthy microbiome has just exploded. So when it comes to creating these kind of, functional drinks products that have probiotic, prebiotic benefits, and, kombucha is an example of this, I think. Like, is this, what do you guys, is this kind of like a really effective and I guess trending benefit and category of drink with consumers right now? What would you say? And do you think it means as much as it to consumers as it does to the industry in many ways? I'll just kind of leave this open to whoever wants to jump in first, actually.
So
I think we're going to fight. We are going to fight on that one.
Oh, okay.
Exactly.
Go on, Sayantan.
Yeah, Toby, whether you said the.
Okay, Raphael, you came in loud and clear there. Raphael, I'll pass it to you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the ladies. That's what it should be all about. So thank you for that. But this is just such an exciting kind of dynamic space, right? So we had probiotic and then prebiotic, and now we have symbiotic and we have postbiotic. So, I mean, extremely dynamic and relevant to this category. From a product development perspective, the matrix of functional drinks is actually very complex because it's very high in water. And the stability of those very fancy little nutrient or bioactive ingredient is complex to maintain, right? So without getting into detail, it offers an awful lot of opportunities, but with that comes an awful lot of challenges. So very relevant, especially as the benefit of those bioactive components has gone well over and beyond gut health, right? And I think the science and the evidence that is provided by some excellent research is supporting that. So anything to do with gut is obviously very relevant here. And then mental health, we have been able to see some evidence of that connection and interaction. And it goes even around what we call metabolic health. So there is an awful lot there around maybe weight management, around glucose management, and around gut health. So that gives, a fantastic cocktail of opportunities for innovation relevant to functional drinks, right? But again, very complex and would have to be assessed very carefully, depending on the target audience, depending on the health benefit and the space that brands or companies want to own, right? So, I could go on for hours, but I won't do that to you. So, but that would be my kind of initial thought around those very interesting ingredients and combination of those ingredients, right? Because they usually work extremely well in synergy.
Thanks, Raphael. Yeah, that's really fascinating input. Okay, so I'll open this up to the other panel. Sayantan, you're unmuted. You can take this away. And maybe if Sayantan, could you add a little bit about on kind of the consumer, how consumers receive these type of products as well? I'd be interested.
So all of the health and wellness interests that I mentioned, right? The health and wellness is driving the functional beverage trend in India and globally. Among health and wellness, consumers are talking most about gut health as deciphered from a social media analysis. And when you talk about gut health, you all normally talk about probiotics, prebiotics, postbiotics, nowadays paraprobiotics, and as you mentioned, the interaction between the gut and the brain, which brings me to the topic of psychobiotics as well. So all this, consumers are really looking forward. Consumers are more interested in gut health than anything else because they they've become aware that the gut microbiome has everything to do with their health and well-being in terms of their mental health as well as the respiratory health. We talk about gut-lung axis as well. And we see a lot of innovation in this area in terms of development of postbiotics, especially because probiotics have a challenge by itself. They cannot be administered into all kinds of products, right? Especially if you are talking about heat-stable beverages. We stick with beverages because we're talking about functional beverages. We talk about shelf-stable beverages which undergo a lot of heat processing. Probiotics will not survive. So you cannot claim a probiotic benefit in the final product. But postbiotics will confer that benefit in the final product if administered. So postbiotics is the way forward in the future.
Thanks, Sayantan. Jan, what do you think about this question?
Well, very interesting topic. It would take us, I think, a full panel. I believe, well, fermentation is the past, the present, and of course, the future of our industry. I'm talking not only about beverages, also food. And it's, in a way, it's using nature to bring functionality, pleasure, convenience. I mean, we don't need to explain much about it, but in the end, pleasure is important because our mouth is the second place where we have more neural termination. So in fact, it's also a functionality itself, and it's the most important driver in food and beverages. Convenience because fermentation makes the product more durable normally. And yeah, as my peers mentioned, in the end is enhancing the product, is giving some excellent mental and gut benefits. So in the end, in my point of view, precision fermentation is one of the most interesting technologies that are coming in our space.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. I believe we could go on in the topic of pro and prebiotics for a whole session, but as we're kind of approaching audience Q&A time. So what I would like to, before we dive into Q&A, I would just like everyone on the panel to leave a kind of a takeaway message for the listeners in terms of functional beverages? What would you kind of like to convey to the audience? What's, I guess, the most important aspect of this really exciting, booming category that our listeners should kind of go away thinking about? So I don't know. Let's, Raphael, do you want to take the lead on this question?
I would, but I could go on again for some time, so I'll keep it short. I think, you know, when we speak about functional drinks, we could potentially look at bringing some very innovative and potentially expensive bioactive, and there could be a real benefit to do that. But in the time where our consumers might be a little bit stretched financially, I just want to make sure that people don't forget what I call affordable nutrition, and how, you know, there are opportunities out there to commercialize functional drinks by looking at it from different perspectives, and you know, starting with basic kind of nutritional requirements, where, you know, some of those functional drinks that can be very high on sugar can be extremely damaging to health and wellness, which we identified as a key important trends nowadays, especially after the pandemic. So I just want maybe to consider how affordable nutrition can be an opportunity for the mass market to have access to functional drinks, right? I just want also to reiterate how co-creation is important in the space of functional drinks, and how by reaching out to external partners can also help to foster innovation around functional drinks. I think other aspects that are very strong at the moment around authenticity, around transparency, around sustainability also need to be addressed for functional drinks. We mentioned packaging, and how, you know, some of those messages or some of those new technologies around packaging can also reinforce this aspect for functional drinks. And maybe just to consider how the microbiome also offers opportunities for functional drinks, especially as the science and the evidence that it plays an important part in metabolic health or wellness is something to look at. And they have new probiotics that are currently being commercialized, which are also spore-forming probiotics that, again, can open new doors to address some of the challenges that can be associated with probiotics. So that's just a couple of thoughts that come to mind now, and suggestions for people to consider when they are looking at innovation around functional drinks.
Great, thank you, Raphael. That was really valuable. So before I move on to Jan and Sayantan, just a quick shout out to the LinkedIn audience. Guys, if you've got questions, fire them into the chat or the comments on LinkedIn. We'll throw them to our panelists. If I can now move on to Jan, do you maybe want to give a quick closing statement?
Yes. Well, I would say regarding functional drinks, personalization, in my opinion, will open new opportunities of innovation and business in this category, because we are seeing more and more digitalization in retail with quick commerce, factories, with smart factories, digitalization, AI, and all these will enable more ways of hypersegmentation. We see a more fragmented, let's say, market, many more targets than in the past. So I believe this category, functional drinks in general, will become a more interesting category in time.
Got exciting things to come. Okay, Sayantan, could you give a quick kind of closing statement?
I'll just extend the point what my peers have said. Like the trends driving Gen Z or the millennials nowadays, especially after COVID, is thoughtful indulgence and premiumization on a budget. They are willing to spend on beverages with health benefits, but they aren't willing to spend an exorbitant amount of money. Now, as Raphael said clearly, that we need to make the drinks more and more affordable. It can be afforded by the general population, and then only it can be expanded across geographies and all. That's one point that we need to keep in mind, always looking at cost optimization and making it affordable to the final consumer with the health benefits they claim. And the second point that I'd like the audience to take away is that personalization, of course, is a big space. Now personalization is the future, and the future is now. Everything, you are all glued to Netflix, I believe, and Netflix offers personalized recommendations. Even beverages are no different. And then to tap into this personalized space, it's important that we really use the data and the technologies wisely. As Raphael and Jan said, we need to get into partnerships to make use of this data and to get access to the data. It is a huge repository of data of the population and their needs. And data-driven research will save you a lot of time. Data-driven research will save you a lot of time in your formulation and your go-to-market. The beverage that you had been researching and trying to launch for 24 months, maybe you can do it in 12 months. So embracing the technology is one key future trend that the companies or the market needs to do.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sayantan. I've actually had a question that is very much relating to personalization. So as we're kind of we're approaching the end of time, and I would just like to throw this question out to our panel because I think it's very, very interesting. So the question is, how will manufacturers adapt to producing a wider range of personalized beverage products, potentially increasing factory complexity or reducing efficiencies? And I'll leave this one open for someone to kind of raise their hand and answer.
Any question again?
That's a tricky one.
Okay,
yeah.
Jan, sorry, it sounds like you may have an answer. Okay.
Yeah. Well, in the end, it's a matter of trying to automate. I mean, the simplify complexity. No, in the end, what will allow this complexity to not become to keep on being profitable to factories? It will probably be demand planning. In the end, it's the core of all operational, business. So I believe with AI and new data models on the way, having some more certainty. I understand that 100% certainty won't be the case, but having more certainty will allow factories to be more personalized, more complex, while being still profitable.
Thank you, Jan.
I said that the companies are already doing it, like Notco. They're already embracing AI and producing personalized beverage products to catering to health needs and all. You just need to adapt the technology, and the partnerships will play a key role in this regard. You don't need to increase the complexity of factories, but partnerships with data companies like the wearable companies. Now, the biggest segment in the personalized nutrition market is being played by digital wearables and the devices, which give you access to the wide pool of data. Now, tapping into this data will help companies manufacture the wide pool of personalized beverages catering to the needs.
Fantastic. Raphael, do you have anything to add to this question?
Certainly a topic that could open to another webinar, but I have prepared a slide maybe that we can just look at very briefly because it might just give our audience a little bit of a perspective on how those new operating model and business model could look like, right? To address some of those aspects of the next wave of I suppose, products and services and technology that are out there. So I don't know if we can look at that slide, but I think the whole element of data is something that companies really need to embrace, whether it is from a customer perspective, whereby, you know, we all have our own data in terms of lifestyle, in terms of age group, in terms of nutritional needs. And for me, customized nutrition is when the customer kind of use their own data, or they have maybe a watch or something, or a phone, and they make a choice based on preference or health benefits. And then on the other side, we have personalized nutrition, where companies use data to offer new services, new technologies, and new products. So there is an interface there around data, whether it is looked at from a consumer perspective or from a manufacturing standpoint. And certainly that opens a very complex and different operating model and business model that companies really need to understand. And I think Jan mentioned it earlier in terms of risk management and risk analysis. You know, that's something that needs to be taken into account. So there is, you know, from my perspective, what I would recommend as well is some very good kind of project management skill, and embrace some of those agile or lean to really test the market, you know, and to kind of constantly build that kind of data in order to be successful and to build a commercially viable and sustainable business, you know. So yeah, not a very easy question to answer, but certainly a good one to close out and hopefully to discuss together again. So yeah, I mean, that slide, you know, took me a while, to say the least, to put it together, and it's probably not a very easy slide to absorb, but I think it's just very important to understand the different segments, and that's what the pyramid represent here. So this is very relevant to functional beverages. You know, we have affordable nutrition, we have functional foods and beverages, we have customized nutrition, and then further along, we have personalized nutrition. So how do we use data, products, and technologies to engage with our different consumers, whether they are looking at it from an experience perspective or a benefits point of view? You know, that's kind of important. And in terms of operating model, we've seen a lot of B2B2C, we've seen a lot of D2C that can work extremely well. And on the right-hand side as well, maybe just to kind of reiterate how we have a balance to achieve in terms of market size and profit margin. So from a business and commercial perspective, you know, I think it's very important to have a good understanding of the target audience, the different tools that are out there to engage with that target audience, to build a solid pipeline and portfolio of offering, because, you know, it's very competitive and very dynamic market. So there are an awful lot of moving parts, as we call them, that need to be taken into account.
Okay, thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much, Raphael. I mean, personally, from the research I've been doing and my experience in a large corporation, I think what you said about the need for adoption of more kind of a more agile approach, I think, to product development is really key. Maybe some of the audience watching this will be kind of grinding their teeth when I say this, but I think, you know, the food and beverage industry it can be a little bit of a kind of traditional and not, you know, not always a fast-moving industry. But when it comes to something like personal nutrition, there's a huge need for a more agile approach, I think, to product development, which is just it's a really interesting topic, and it's a really important opportunity, I believe. So yeah, thanks to all of you for raising such interesting points here. We have reached time now, so I would just like to first of all thank our wonderful panel of speakers for their contributions and the fascinating discussion today. I just want to reiterate there was so much wisdom in this discussion. So I really hope all of the food and beverage industry viewers are taking note. And yeah, I would just kind of like to touch on what we teased earlier at the start of the event today. So we have an interesting announcement and opportunity for all of our viewers, and that is, as we explained before, we do these roundtable discussions and events with our network every week as much as possible, and it is always full of fruitful insights and discussions, as you've seen here today. So what we are doing is we are opening up to our audience the opportunity to have an exclusive event with our experts. So the format of this event will be, we will gather together relevant experts who will discuss with you a challenge that you are having in your business. So a key kind of food and beverage industry challenge that your organization is facing. And we will hold a private personal event for you. How do we make this event happen? All that we ask is we're going to share a link to a form in LinkedIn. And all we would like you to do in the form is just submit your email and tell us a little bit, or well, in as much detail as possible, actually, about a challenge that you are facing. And what we will do is we are going to read through all of the submissions, and we're going to pick out what is the most exciting challenge to tackle. We will gather together a panel of our relevant experts who can help discuss and address this challenge and advise you. And then we will hold a personal webinar just for you, whoever can kind of present us with the most interesting challenge to tackle, the most exciting challenge to tackle. And yeah, we're going to hold a personal webinar with a relevant panel of experts to discuss this. So please do submit your various challenges, because this is it's a very unique opportunity to gather together a panel similar to the one that you've seen today of people who specialize in the food and beverage industry in different areas. And again, whatever your challenge doesn't necessarily have to relate to functional drinks. It can be anything within the food and beverage industry. As I mentioned at the start, the Gourmet Pro Network is vast. So feel free to submit a challenge of your choosing. And we will do our best to kind of help you address that. Yeah, I think this is really exciting. It's really unique. You have a fantastic opportunity to receive the kind of exclusive insights that you saw here today, and some of the just really interesting and valuable discussion around the functional beverage space. And we can expand that to any kind of industry area. So within food and beverage, that is. So please, yeah, you can scan the QR code on screen. You'll get access to the form. I believe it's also being posted in the LinkedIn chat. But I'm really excited by this opportunity myself, and I'm excited to receive some of the submissions and challenges from our audience today. Yeah, so that's it from today's webinar. I would once again just like to give a huge round of applause to our wonderful panelists who have given so much valuable input today around what is a very interesting, trending, and in many ways exciting category. What we're going to do now is we're going to close down the LinkedIn chat, the LinkedIn, sorry, webinar at least. We'll leave the Zoom open for the Gourmet Pro Network. So if there is more discussion to be had, we can kind of keep going a little bit. But for our LinkedIn audience at home, thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned as much as I did. And yeah, have a wonderful Friday, great weekend. And we look forward to your submissions for that personal webinar event. Thank you, everyone, for for putting this together, attending, and making it such a fantastic discussion.